Getting there. Oh, hang on. Let's mute that so you don't end up with that horrible echo again. All right, cool. And we're live.
Okay.
Right. Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode and first live stream of Animated Discussion with me, Lewis Knight.
And me, Jenny Allen.
Cool. So in these kind of streams or podcasts, what we're going to do is talk about animation in terms of movies and TV. And we are starting off with Bojack Horseman for our first episode because it's something that I've watched. Well, when we conceived the idea of the podcast, I'd watched fairly recently, and I know that Jenny, you've watched it.
Yeah, I started watching it. I've been with it since the beginning because it came out originally when I was on maternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat on my sofa and binged the whole thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I'll go back to and watch over and over again.
Yeah.
Which is not great for the old mental health, probably. But...
No, it's a heavy going show, isn't it? So you were saying to me recently that you had to explain. Had to explain it to your mum.
Yeah, my mum asked, or it came up back when we were allowed to see other people. We were having dinner somewhere, and I found myself explaining over dinner to my mum this show, which is sort of a cartoon sitcom about a horse and his animal friends, and also sort of about depression and addiction and substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky to explain to someone who hasn't seen it and is potentially not the kind of intended audience for the show.
Yeah.
I think you have to be on that wavelength. Otherwise, it just sounds completely ridiculous,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it took me quite a while to get you to watch it. I've badgered a lot of people to watch this show.
Yeah.
Why do you think you were originally not into it?
I don't know. It's weird because when I've tried watching it a few times, and I watched the first series probably 2 or 3 times, and then I got onto the second series, and I was just like, this just isn't funny, and I'm just not really enjoying it. So yeah. I never really got into it, and then when series 6 came out, I was like, I think it was the second half of series 6 was due to come out, and everyone was getting excited, and they were talking about rewatching and this, that, and the other, and I was just like, right, okay, I'm going to give it one more go, one valiant effort, and it just kind of clicked for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was sort of all in. And a few people said to me like, "Oh, don't binge watch it. It's really heavy going. It's a hard show to watch in big doses." And I was like, "Oh, right, okay." Watched the first season probably in one night when I was working on a night shift, and I was like, I kind of want to watch series 2, but I also don't want to overdo it. So, and then I think I watched most of it in a few weeks. It was one of those...
Yeah, it didn't take you very long once you'd started it, I don't think.
No, it was one of those shows that I watched. Like I'd watch it all night at work, and I'd have like a couple of episodes left. And I'm like, I'll just whack them on, when I get in from my night shift, and I'll watch them before bed.
Yeah.
Or like I'd watch it in the evening after work. So yeah, it's definitely got to be one of those shows that I was a little bit obsessed with.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think it hits that tipping point, doesn't it? You watch it originally and you kind of think this is really odd. And there's always that one moment that kind of that gets you. And when I did the rewatch to prepare to talk about it properly, I remember going through season 1 and kind of thinking, where does it hit that point where it's not just like some funny sitcom about a washed up horse, and turn into something else. I think there's a moment where I think it's when he starts sabotaging Todd's rock opera, possibly. And it's like, oh, this is getting quite dark. Really. And then kind of over the course of it, it just reaches new depths of, oh, we're really going there, aren't we? You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was after the end of series, the second half of series 6, like they had a clip of like all the actors and the team behind the show talking about it, and I think it was Will Arnett said something like, I read the script and I just didn't expect it to go in the direction, like he just thought it was going to be
none of the
about,
actors knew what they were getting into.
Yeah, no. They just thought it was going to be about anthropomorphized animals, or people animals, and and then the next thing you know, it's like drug addiction, substance abuse, and
I did actually. I have a list of the topics covered in Bojack, because I kind of feel like you're going to miss something huge where it covers so much. So you've got addiction, depression, abortion, adoption, miscarriage, difficult family relationships, alcoholism, Alzheimer's, the Me Too movement, and it just kind of seamlessly covers all of them and brings them all into this one big story. But another thing I quite liked about it is that while it is one big story, you do see a lot of separate arcs for the different characters. There's very clear character development kind of for everyone. And I don't often feel like someone particularly got neglected, or there was a story that you didn't get a good enough grasp on as the series went on.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I mean, we'll cover it towards a bit later on, but like they all get their kind of their happy ending as well, which is nice. Other than Bojack, so you kind of follow their life, well, their brief life story, and you see it come to some kind of fruition, which is quite nice. So
we say about a brief life story, but you actually get a lot of backstory for most of the kind of main cast in the end, really. In Bojack's case, going back generations even. And Princess Carolyn as well, I think, goes back to kind of her mother, doesn't it? So.
What I mean, I'm not really like, obviously it covers from like the start of his career in I think it's the 80s, and then through to the 90s. But what time period is it actually set across? So like the main kind of story from when you start the first episode to, is it like 5-6 years?
I've always thought it was, I think it kind of covers the not like real time, because it's a limited series rather than a but I've always taken it to be like that kind of that year, and they make a big deal when they're doing like the flashback bits. I think there's the songs they have on the radio, like the generic 90s grunge song, and they've always made it quite clear where it sits. But I've always just thought of it as a kind of generic the present,
Okay.
Because like all the celebrities are kind of relevant to now, I think.
Famous actors.
Showing myself up for being old and out of touch.
I mean, I think it might have been a little bit different for me, because obviously I was rewatching it like 6 years or 5 years after the fact.
Of course.
So I don't know when Andrew Garfield or famous actor Zach Braff were ever relevant, other than
don't say that about Zach Braff.
Scrubs and Spider-Man. But
that's true.
I guess
that because that the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man would have been like the year before the first season of BoJack, I think, wasn't it? Or not that far, not that long before, anyway.
But then Andrew Garfield doesn't actually show up until I think it's like the third or fourth season, isn't it? So
yeah, that's true.
So obviously, it's got quite a. It's interesting that it has these kind of dark tones to it, despite having very irreverent and sometimes pretty daft throwaway jokes in it. But it's interesting that the art style is almost totally different from that. So like seeing, I don't know, like in scenes where there's strip clubs and there's pole dancing orca whales and characters like Sextina Aquafina,
yeah,
which is a sexy not my opinion, anthropomorphized
outing yourself.
Yeah, dolphin. Yeah, no, I don't want to fuck a dolphin. Let's just clarify that.
It's important to say that.
Yeah, I don't want anything taken out of context. Yeah, so I mean, it looks like it's bright, it's colourful, it looks almost like a kid's cartoon.
Yeah, like my mother-in-law wouldn't be able to tell without really paying attention that it wasn't a kid's cartoon.
Yeah, she'd just whack it on for the kid, and yeah, there you go.
I've got to say, actually, when Joey was like, before he was talking, this is my son who is now 6, I would just watch it like during the day. The stay-at-home mum is very boring. Like, he's not going to learn to say any of these words. It's fine.
Well, no. At least it's better than some of the drivel that's on daytime TV. So
yeah, it got to a certain point in his learning to repeat words. So I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Because as far as he's concerned, it's just funny animals. Getting drunk. No, so like you were saying about the animation style, it's I think what it is that it's not grotesque. To pull a very easy example out of the air, Rick and Morty, I find the actual art style pretty grotesque in that it's not meant to look cute, it's not meant to look polished or nice, and that really backs up the the whole feel of the show.
Yeah.
Where I think with BoJack it softens it a lot. Like if this was played as if you dropped the animals and it was just a live action show, I'd probably be much less interested in it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not hugely a drama person.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, it is a drama with comedy aspects. Like, it's not a comedy show.
No.
Which is, I mean, I just find that really odd because obviously, a lot of animated stuff is specifically comedy.
Yeah. It's a joke format, isn't it? Everyone sees it as a joke format.
Yeah. But
you go into it and you're expecting like laughs a minute, and it's not that. There are whole episodes where you will not laugh once, or you will, but it's a kind of dark.
there are whole episodes where you want to cry.
Yeah.
Like through the entire episode. So.
Yeah. Are there any episodes that you can't watch again?
Yes. One in particular that stands out, and I couldn't watch it all the way through because it just actually there's probably a few in particular, but one that definitely stands
Which one's
out.
your top pick?
It's the underwater episode,
Fish Out of Water.
Yes, that's it.
Series 3 episode 4.
Yeah, because there is zero kind of verbal dialogue in it, if that makes sense. Like, there are lots of gestures and written cues, I guess, but yeah, there's no actual spoken dialogue in it, and I think it's in most seasons there are at least there's at least one episode that doesn't really like it.
It's a bit anachronistic.
Yeah, it doesn't. What am I trying to say?
Flow.
Yeah, like it doesn't feel like a canon episode, even though
Yeah.
it has a lot of relevance to the story and it develops the it does progress the story along. Like Fish Out of Water, I mean, I don't feel like I really missed anything with it. But
No, nothing that you don't get
just,
from context later on.
yeah, but it just felt too I don't know, it just felt too different from the rest of the series, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
it was quite jarring. And there are a couple of other episodes, like I think I said to you, and then you made me go back and watch it, like
Free Churro,
yeah,
the eulogy episode.
yeah, which is completely the opposite, where it is
Yeah.
literally just a almost exclusively a Bojack monologue for 20 odd minutes. And yeah, I turned that off, and as it happens, I missed probably one of the best jokes in the entire show.
In the whole thing.
Yeah, never mind like that series, just the show in general.
Yeah.
And then you were like, right, you need to go back and watch the end of the episode. And I was like, God damn it, why didn't I?
I can't believe you didn't see it coming when I told you had to go back and watch the end of it. So I think I figured out, I guessed what was going to happen kind of just before. But it's still like the best delayed payoff joke in the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. What about you?
But it is a slog to get there, and I have to admit I did not pay a great deal of attention to the actual eulogy. I was sat working one night with it kind of on in the background, half listening to it.
Yeah. And it does develop. It's a shame because it develops a lot of backstory between Bojack and Beatrice.
Mm-hmm.
His mum, which is great. But again, it's one of those episodes that you don't really miss anything that you couldn't pick up in context from like other later episodes.
Yeah, or that you couldn't have already have inferred from every other scene about their relationship.
Well, yes, quite. Well, not even just inferred, like outright. Like it's very blatant their relationship later on, but yeah. So, like, are there any episodes for you?
I find the one with the doll, with his mum's, the doll that his mum becomes very attached to when she's staying with him in Hollyhock.
Oh, yeah.
I find that really difficult to watch, where he throws the doll away and she becomes really distressed.
Mm-hmm.
I think anyone who's got family who have been through anything similar will find those things difficult to see, but I find that really uncomfortable to see. And I think that's which one is it? Is it series 4, Stupid Piece of Shit? Is that the one where he's really in his head the whole thing? You get this really excellent view into what it's like to have depression by hearing Bojack's thoughts, and there's these kind of little roughly animated bits that go along with it. So you get to see him kind of go to disappear off to the bar and stay there all day, and Hollyhock wonders where he was. And like that one is difficult to watch, but I don't tend to skip it because it's such a good depiction of his state of mind, and it's really well done.
Yeah.
The other one, I think, there's one that I don't like just because of the visuals of it, and it's the episode where Bojack and Diane's therapists are discussing their clients with each other at the restaurant, and they're using code names, and it shows you their code names, but they've given them like Todd is a hand with a face, and Princess Carolyn is balls of yarn, and then Diane is Princess Diana, and
Yeah.
Bojack's a zebra, and I find it visually so annoying that I can't watch the episode.
Yeah. I must admit, it did. It kind of felt I don't know. I know it's intended, but it felt a little bit lazy. Like,
yeah,
but it was the laziness of the therapists rather than lazy story writing or lazy animation.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Emotionally speaking, I don't love going back and seeing Time's Arrow, the Beatrice and Butterscotch flashback, where she's lobotomized and
Oh yeah, fuck.
Her mother's lobotomized rather.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a difficult one, I think.
Yeah, it's difficult because if you like, that didn't really bother me because I mean I've never had family be lobotomized. I don't think anyone's had family being lobotomized in probably the last 50 or 60 years. But like, I've never had close family that have kind of suffered with health problems like dementia or whatever else, or just the kind of issues that the parents or grandparents suffer from in the show. So yeah, it's never really had that kind of personal feeling or personal impact on me.
No, I think it's more than that for me. Is it's a female thing. It's seeing how she suffered because of her gender, and all the toxic things that her mother says to her about getting fat and things like that. It's you really see how she became the unpleasant person that she is towards Bojack, and it's very sad to see how kind of inevitable it is. She never had a chance, she was always going to be messed up by her family, but also seeing her mother's grief, I think, was really difficult. After is it her uncle or brother, her older brother, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where he dies. Like the bit where they're out at the bar and her mum drive or forces her to drive home, and that's just a very difficult one.
Yeah.
But I think that one fits well. So that's another one of the episodes that, like you say, doesn't feel, even though it is canon, obviously it's kind of character history.
Yeah.
It's kind of out of the ordinary flow of episodes. But I like that one. I think that one works in a way that like Fish Out of Water doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Enjoy that one. But,
yeah. Just have a quick look. I'm just having a look at your notes.
Okay, my notes. Okay. So we've covered most of my weird episodes that I've got noted down.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can.
So I was just going to say, so like, one of the big things for me about just the show in general is how real it gets. So like, you see kind of different characters interacting, or you see like how Bojack deals with his own problems by kind of self-medicating and whatever else, but how he then reflects on himself because of his problems. It just feels very, not so much the self-medication, but it feels very real and relatable. So like, yeah, I mean, particularly with Bojack, the kind of self-loathing. I mean, I know from personal experience, like, when I've been at my lowest, like, I've hated myself because of the shitty things that I've done to people. So it's, yeah, it does, it gets you kind of right, not in the, I don't know, wherever.
I think it's something the show does fantastically well. Is it's a show that's about like I said, anthropomorphized animals, and B, about washed up celebrities in Hollywood, which is a world that most of us have zero experience of whatsoever. But everyone that likes the show finds it so relatable because of the failings of the characters are almost universal.
Yeah.
Depression and anxiety and family issues and all of those things are at the heart of every single one of the characters and why they are who they are. So everyone's got a character they can relate to, despite having almost nothing in common with them in terms of their actual lives,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's weird because in some respects, like, I can't relate with Bojack in any sense. Like, I'm not a washed up celebrity. I don't have issues with substance abuse or a drink problem. I'm not a horse. So, but then in other aspects, like, I relate to him on a deeply personal and real level because of the kind of the trauma that he's been through growing up, and just the shit that, like, in some aspects he is a product of his own making, but he is also a product of his own poor circumstance, I guess. So, like, he ends up finding himself in bad situations, but he doesn't have the foresight to go, actually, this is a really bad situation, I should remove myself from it. Which is, I mean, I've been there myself. So
it's something I always think of as the Steve Martin film thing. Like, his character will always end up in some terrible situation. There's a very easy way to get out of it, which is to just say, oh, whoops, I shouldn't be here, let's deal with it appropriately. Or you can just keep bumbling into the next terrible thing that will happen.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which is exactly what he does.
Yeah, bumbling from one bad situation to another. So yeah. Are there any characters that you particularly relate with?
Not to be a cliche artsy type, but obviously Diane, I think.
Yeah.
Which, on a deeper level, as an adult who's finally started taking antidepressants, which I have realistically known that I needed for most of my adult life, and avoided for probably exactly the same reasons that Diane avoided them, that she felt that she was who she was, and to take them would be to take something away from that. Diane's a writer and I'm more of an artist kind of nowadays, I suppose. But you do worry that those things that make you sad are the things that also give you the greatest kind of creative edge.
Yeah.
And I think seeing Diane, I know I've read a lot of other women since the last series came out, where Diane starts taking antidepressants and puts on some weight and finally starts writing something other than her depressing autobiography, and finally finds kind of success and contentment. I know a lot of people have been inspired by that to make changes in their own life, which wasn't what did it for me, but I think that speaks a lot to how relatable Diane is as a character, and how well they've written her as a modern woman as well. The kind of frustration that she feels and the pointlessness is all very, very real.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's interesting, like, particularly with Diane's story, because she agonizes for so long over a story that she probably didn't need to write anyway. Because, like, from my perspective, it sort of felt like she was trying to make something. Well, no, not even just from my perspective. I think that's just the way that she was written. She was trying to make something, like, almost justify her trauma, or make trauma to justify her writing a book. I'm not really sure, to be quite frank, but at least she then finds, like, she finds contentment, like you said, when she starts writing kind of
young adult fiction.
Yeah, which isn't what she intended to write, but it's what's popular. And
I like that you see her connect with Guy's son through that, though. You get that moment where he comes in and pretends that he's being all cool and he's not really interested.
Yeah.
But that's what makes that connection between them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not her being the person that she's always romanticized. I think she says in the show, romanticizing your own sadness. When she stops doing that, she is able to actually connect to other people instead of just being wrapped up in how sad she is. Which is kind of what leads her to all of her bad decisions, I think.
Yeah.
Like most of the characters, I suppose. Yeah. I think with most TV shows that I've got really into, I have this habit of kind of focusing on a peripheral character instead of the character that it's allegedly about. Like in Mad Men, I see it as Peggy's story rather than Don's story. I think The Office is about Dwight, and House is really about his relationship with Wilson. And I think Bojack, because he does develop, but he's fairly static. Like the show is just him going in a very short series of kind of one step forward, two steps back.
Yeah.
And even at the end, he doesn't really come out of that, and there's more hanging over him. Whereas Diane, you see her start out in this, really obviously not great relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter and everything else that she goes through, and she actually develops. She actually has an arc, and it's much more interesting to me than
absolutely.
Rich white man is sad,
Yeah, absolutely.
I say white man, he's a brown horse, but I think it's clear where he's meant to stand on that scale.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like we said earlier, it's the same for a lot of the characters. Like you see Todd start off as being a kind of slacker, couch surfer, with no kind of real prospects, and then he kind of, I can't even remember what he does at the end. Isn't he the app?
So he is the kind of head of the what time is it right now .com thing for a bit. I'm not sure. I can't remember what he's doing right at the end, actually.
No. But you see a kind of natural progression, and you see him.
Well, he's moved in with he's realised that he's asexual, and he's found an asexual girlfriend, and they've moved in together, and he's kind of patched things up with his mum. Yeah. Sort of.
But you see these kind of improvements in his life over the story. Over the series. Where, like, you were saying, like, Bojack has kind of peaks and troughs, but he stays fairly static towards the lower end of the scale. But everyone else kind of has peaks and troughs, but with
they're on an upward curve.
With an average of an upward curve.
I think that's what keeps the show interesting, though. I mean, it is kind of about everyone around Bojack developing away from him and outgrowing him. And by the end, you see him... I mean, obviously spoilers, but at the end, in the actual finale, he's there kind of still the same guy that he always was, really. And everyone else is nice to him, but they're done with him, Yeah. Princess Carolyn won't work with him again. Todd doesn't live with him anymore. And then you have Diane right at the end, and he says, wouldn't it be funny if this was the last time we speak to each other, or whatever, as he says, and she just kind of leaves it hanging. Like they're all willing to still be there for him, but they're not going along with his life anymore. He's lost all those people, and he's got to figure himself out. So I think really all the amazing stories that you see for everyone else are meant to be a kind of backdrop for how Bojack is he's stuck with himself. It's the old wherever you go, there you are thing. That he can't just get away from or escape into other people, which you see him try to do a few times over the series, with Wanda and I've forgotten her name, but they're
Gina.
Yes, that's the one. You kind of see how everyone else just grows past him, and he's kind of stuck. So everyone else is kind of more interesting than Bojack in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like you said, everyone has or like we've said rather, everyone has a kind of natural progression in an upward fashion, whereas Bojack kind of stays quite static. Um, so obviously, like you mentioned earlier, that it covers a lot of topics.
Hmm.
Particularly, I mean, like you mentioned Todd kind of realizing that he's asexual, and then there's things like Princess Carolyn going through the like finding out that she's. Is it because she can't have children, or is it because of her age?
She can't have children because she has that miscarriage with
Yes, that's right. Yes.
I forgot his name.
So, yeah, Princess Caroline finding out that she can't have children, and then going through the adoption process, and then obviously, as we've already discussed, Diane going through her own personal thing with like finding out that like or getting help for her depression and it affecting her creativity. So, what for you was the kind of best the best the best way that they dealt with a subject? Like, I mean, obviously they did a lot of them all quite well, and they covered quite a lot of really troubling and hard to tackle topics, particularly in as we've already mentioned, in a TV show, an animated TV show about anthropomorphized animals. So, like, what do you think was the best way? Like, what was the best topic that they covered?
I'm not sure. I think probably I'd have to be very generic and say that their depiction of depression is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And they cover it through so many characters that it could almost be seen as the theme of the show, you know. And there's just so much to be said about it, and they've shown so many different kind of facets of it. You've got Bojack's proper destroy your own life thing, and Diane's kind of nihilism, which is what I relate to the most. That kind of, well, it's all kind of pointless, but I might as well do something, I guess.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own kind of take on it, and you see it so many different ways, that everyone has a kind of a character they can relate to who's gone through it in one way or another. And I think all the other things really tie into that as well, don't they? So, you know, the substance abuse, which is certainly for Bojack a facet of his depression. I think probably a lot of the other things are covered within it as well. I mean, apart from that, I think they dealt with his mother's decline really well. That kind of parental decline is very difficult for anyone our age to think about, I think.
Yeah.
So it was always going to be quite hard hitting, but they did a really good job of showing it, I think.
Yeah.
Particularly in those episodes where she comes to live with Bojack and Hollyhock when she's there.
Yeah. And they never.
What do you think? What's your?
I think it's probably kind of Todd coming to terms with his with being asexual, just because I mean, one, it's not something that's covered particularly in depth, so it's great to see that kind of representation in mainstream media. But also, I mean, it doesn't feel crowbarred in, and it feels like it was dealt with quite delicately. Like, you see the progression of his kind of realization, rather than it just going like one episode and it's like, bam, oh yeah, I'm asexual, look at me. You see the kind of development of him kind of coming to terms with it and the realization.
I think they first introduce it with Emily, don't they? His old friend.
Yeah.
And you go back and see he's not really interested in the whole that side of it at all.
Yeah.
And then he kind of gradually realizes it kind of in the real time of the show as well.
But also they don't make a big deal about it either.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think that's true of a lot of the kind of the representation in the show, of characters of color and all the different gender identities, and they don't make a big deal out of any of it, which is it's quite depressing that it's notable.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a big deal, but it is really nice to see. It just, this is how the world is, and this is all the kinds of people that there are, and it just isn't a big deal. But I do like that about the show.
Yeah.
I just found here actually one of my notes was saying, saying earlier about how the show kind of starts out like it's just going to be a fun cartoon, and then you gradually kind of realize where it's going. I noticed on my rewatch that Bojack's first words to Herb Kazaz in the show are "get cancer, jerkwad" in season 1, episode 4. And I don't think it's long after that they do the reveal that he does have cancer, but it's it's kind of indicative of where the show is going in terms of tone. It's easy talking about Bojack Horseman, I think, to get stuck in the difficult and heavy things that they cover, and it certainly isn't a laugh-a-minute show all the way through, but it would be a shame not to point out that it is also incredibly funny in its own way.
Absolutely.
What do you have any standout kind of running jokes or any particularly funny lines that you come back to?
So the animal puns are probably some of my favourite. So just some of the names, so like Quentin Tarantulatino, I think his name is.
Tarantulatino, I think.
Yeah. And then there's like scenes where they're in film studios and there's posters for TV shows or movies in the background, and there's one that stands out. It's like the Bunisher instead of the Punisher. So they're probably like, some of my favourite jokes, just because they're so
Krill
stupid.
And Grace in Princess Carolyn's apartment, isn't there?
Yeah. But then they're not ones that you would necessarily expect. They're just kind of like Krill and Grace, for instance. I haven't thought about Will and Grace for years. Probably since it was still popular. But yeah, like who would think to put a Krill and Grace poster in her apartment?
The puns and the background and the sight gags are amazing and so consistent as well. But there are a lot of like the animal characteristics jokes, like there's the cat up a tree apologizing to the fireman having to get it down. And like Mr. Peanut Butter getting annoyed at the mailman and stuff.
Yeah.
All those kind of animal moments that peek through. Which also is a bit of an odd one where they have it's always going to be awkward when there's people animals in the show. Like, what about actual animals? And you kind of think of that in terms of the real world. If this was the case, we probably wouldn't say that. We probably would. It would be awkward eating animals if your neighbor was an animal, but they address that with like the Chicken for Days episode. Like, we've got friend chickens and food chickens.
Yeah. I mean, that's I have to admit I did find that quite funny, just from a kind of personal perspective. But so I mean, what about yourself? Like, what's your...
My absolute favourite joke in the series is really stupid. It's is it Sebastian St. Clair, the kind of philanthropist that Diane goes off to follow.
Yeah.
When he's talking about, I was rich and I had everything, but I would stand and listen to the children crying in the night, and I would shout, "Shut up, children!" It's stupid, but it's my favourite joke in the whole series.
It's funny because it's probably not that far from the truth in some cases.
I know, yeah.
People who are supposedly good people.
it's all my favorite things tend to be the delivery of the line rather than a particularly well-crafted joke. I'm fairly easily amused that way.
Yeah.
And like there's so many great running jokes. I think one of my favorites is Vincent Adult Man,
Yeah.
Princess Caroline's boyfriend, who is just 3 kids in a trench coat, as Bojack just flatly points out. And I love how he's the only one that addresses that,
Yeah.
and no one else seems to notice. And Princess Caroline kind of asks at one point, she's like, "Do you think Vincent's weird and acting weird?" And Bojack's like, "He's 3 kids in a trench coat, so yes." And no one pays any attention to it. And he kind of pops back up over and over again. You know, you see him throughout the thing. I think actually the least funny thing about that was when they properly had when he was in the apartment and kept it like swapping over to make Princess Caroline think that he was an adult with a son.
Yeah.
I think that pushed it a bit far, but I just enjoyed it as a kind of running gag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like I say about the delivery, there are so many fantastic voice actors in it as well. I'm a bit of a nerd about voice actors, and I like challenging myself to be able to recognize all of them. But like, are there any particular voice actors that you enjoyed in this show?
To be honest, there weren't many that I could kind of pick out. So like Will Arnett has now gone from being Job Bluth to Spider-Man. Sorry, not Spider-Man, to Batman. Lego Batman. To now.
Will Arnett is still my favorite Batman.
And he will now forever be Batman and Bojack.
Yeah. I can't hear his voice in anything else now without thinking of Bojack.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I quite like. Is it Paul F. Tompkins as Mr. Peanut Butter?
Yeah.
Just because they are 2 very different characters. Like, sorry, not characters. Like Paul F. Tompkins, very different to how you expect him to look from the sound of Mr. Peanut Butter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but he was quite a new kind of, like, I hadn't heard of him before.
Okay, I listened to one of his podcasts, so I was familiar with him already, but probably didn't know what he looked like, you know.
Yeah.
I think I didn't know what he looked like until I was watching an episode of Community and recognized the voice. And he plays a guy that tries to seduce Abed in a bar by talking to him about Farscape. And I was like, I recognize that voice. But no, it really wasn't what I expected him to look like.
No. I must admit, like, I quite like that they, apart from the main characters, like, they didn't really, well, even some of the main characters, they didn't go for kind of huge names, presumably because they didn't have the budget to do so. Kind of
apart from where people were playing themselves, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like Jessica Biel is the one that stands out, I think. And I'd read somewhere that Jessica Biel was the one who floated the idea to the writers that she would be this horrible version of herself, which is really mean and conceited, and that was her idea apparently. So kudos to Jessica Biel for having a decent sense of humor, I guess. The one that I felt really ashamed of for not picking up on until my billionth rewatch is that Captain Peanut Butter, Mr. Peanut Butter's brother, is played by Weird Al, who pops up a lot as a voice actor, particularly in kids stuff. I just saw him today in an episode of Gravity Falls, and he's in Teen Titans Go and stuff. But it took me so long to figure out that he was Captain Peanut Butter. Probably because he's just a bit part kind of actor. He's not in it very much. Making excuses for myself here, but I really enjoyed him as a kind of insert. John Krasinski actually was another one as Secretariat, because obviously most people just know him as Jim from The Office, you know. So to be playing this kind of dark and this dark character with secrets and a very tragic ending was a bit of a an unexpected choice.
Yeah. I mean, a big one for me, because she's in quite a lot of shows that I thoroughly enjoy, is Kirsten Shaw,
Oh yeah.
as Sarah Lynn.
Hmm.
Because I mean, she has one of those voices that's like, that's her voice, and you
Yeah.
recognize her in literally,
It's so distinctive.
yeah, literally anything that she's in.
Yeah, I was watching Bob's Burgers the other day, and Joey came in and thought I was watching Gravity Falls because he recognised it as Mabel's voice.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, she's another one, and like Gravity Falls and Bob's Burgers are two of my other favorite animated TV series anyway. So to have her in all three of them is pretty excellent.
Mm. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I guess Aaron Paul is, although I'm not a Breaking Bad fan.
No.
Sorry, internet. I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for that one. But I think Aaron Paul as Todd is brilliant. He's really got that kind of slacker.
Yeah, it's so weird because I mean, again, he's someone that I'd only ever known as Jesse from Breaking Bad. I think that's his name in Breaking Bad. I don't know. I'm not a Breaking Bad fan myself, so
lots of people have disowned us now.
Yeah, well, whatever. Fuck those guys.
It's just not that interesting, guys. I'm sorry.
But yeah, like he was. I'd only ever known him as Jesse in Breaking Bad, so to see him be a very, very different character.
I don't know. I feel like accidentally making meth might be a Todd kind of subplot.
Yeah, I think so.
It's within the bounds of possibility.
So obviously there are some notable voice actors. What are some of your favourite lines from the show?
Oh,
and who said
big
them?
question. So there's one that I think we talked about, like the piece of wisdom that sticks with you from Bojack. And there's knocking stuff over on my desk. There's a bit where Sarah Lynn that's not Sarah Lynn, is it? Look at my ass. It's where Bojack wants Diane to tell him that she thinks that he's a good person deep down. And she says, I don't think I believe in deep down. I kind of think that all you are is just the things that you do. Which, if it's true, is pretty terrible news for Bojack, because all the things that he does are terrible. And I don't even know that I agree with it, but it stuck with me as a line.
Yeah.
It's just a kind of thing to think about, I think. How about you? Is there a line that stuck with you?
So, I mean, she's not in it for a huge amount, but Lisa Kudrow plays a character that we mentioned briefly earlier, Wanda, his girlfriend from that was in a coma from the 80s.
Yeah, must be the 80s. Yeah,
but I think it was before Bojack. Oh no, I think
they were from about the same time period, weren't they? Because that's why he.
Yeah.
Oh no, because she didn't know who he was.
No, and so it was before Horsing Around, but during the 80s.
Yeah. Some ad research.
Yeah. But I think it's towards like the kind of breakdown of their relationship when she says like, you know, it's funny when you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags, and I don't know why, but that's always stuck with me. Not that I could point out a red flag if I saw one, if it slapped me about the face, but
yeah, let me tell you that in the kind of private Facebook groups where women talk to other women about their relationships, that GIF comes up a lot.
The other one is, which is more relatable, where I can't remember the context, but he says on the phone, "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go take a shower, so I can't tell if I'm crying or not."
Yeah.
Which sometimes I'd kind of be like,
we've all been there.
yeah, we've all been there. Crying in the shower.
To go to my crying chamber now. Actually, there's another right from the not the finale, the view from halfway down, the second to last episode.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much a line, but the poem that Secretariat reads, "The View from Halfway Down," the title of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's just fantastic. But also there's a line when they're all going through that door on the stage right at the end, and Herb is about to go through, and Bojack says, "See you on the other side," and Herb says, "There is no other side, Bojack. This is it." I think as someone who's always had a lot of deep, dark worries about death, the cheerful little thing that I am, that one really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's probably worth talking about the finale as its own entire section. I know people had a lot of feelings about it.
I have thoughts and feelings about it.
Tell me your thoughts and feelings about the
finale. So I didn't like the finale. I didn't like the last episode. I thought the penultimate episode was a far superior episode, and would have been a better episode to have finished the series on. But I do understand why the finale was needed, just to kind of wrap things up for everyone, as we mentioned.
Yeah, I wanted to see everyone else's endings.
Yeah. So, like, tying everything up. So, Judah and Princess Carolyn getting married.
I really liked that. I've always wanted them to get together. I was pleased with that one.
And then finding out that Diane and
Guy
are they married?
Yeah, I think so.
And they both moved to Chicago?
Texas, wasn't it?
Houston, maybe.
I think so.
Either way, they got married and they moved somewhere.
They did something.
Well, they maybe got married and they definitely moved somewhere. But
we're fans of the show.
I mean, this would have been brilliant probably 2 months ago when we had originally intended to record this.
Yeah, back when I fucked it up the first time, yeah.
But yeah, so like you see that everyone has moved on. So obviously Todd has moved in with his girlfriend. Princess Carolyn is married with to Judah. Diane's with Guy. Mr. Peanut Butter is he's still with Pickles.
Did him and Pickles break up?
I can't remember.
Or did they not?
Can't remember. But you see a kind of finale for everyone, but you don't really get an ending for Bojack other than him going back to prison.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't like time skips in TV, and I understand why we needed one. I'm not interested in a whole season of Bojack in prison either. But I don't like them as a thing. It's just cheating, you know. It's like, oh, and then 6 months later, you know, wave a little like ooh, title card.
Yeah.
It bugs me. I understand why we needed it, but I don't love it.
No, that's fair enough.
But I don't think anyone out there would argue that View from Halfway Down wasn't the superior episode. And I think you could have achieved exactly the same thing for Bojack by just having, I mean, if you wait right until the end of the credits, you have the flat line anyway, don't you? And then you hear it beep again to indicate that he didn't die.
Yeah.
And that would have told you all you needed to know about Bojack. Like, he's still going, guys. but that whole episode was so fantastically crafted down to every tiny detail of what the characters are eating at the table, and the art on the walls and stuff is just ridiculously detailed in every thought that's gone into it.
And even down to just having like Secretariat at the table instead of his dad, because Secretariat played a bigger role in his life than his dad did.
Yeah. I think the other bit that gets, like, you see Sarah Lynn gets older throughout the episode, doesn't she? It starts off as child star Sarah Lynn, and gradually gets up to the age of her death. Which ties back to what he says, like, right at the beginning of the series when he says to Todd, Sarah Lynn grew up right before our eyes, didn't she? So you see her at the end grow up right before your eyes. And I think, what else was I going to say about that episode? It's the song that Sarah Lynn does, which is a callback to Gina's song from season 4 Underground, I think. So the Don't Stop Dancing Till the Curtain Falls song. And then that's her ending as she sings that, and then she goes through the doorway. That was an amazing callback. And the song itself is very good, but everything that happened in that bit was so touching, that and the poem, and Herb's ending. And that the last moment you see with Bojack where he calls Diane and asks if she'll just stay on the phone with him. I think that shows you all he's ever wanted from Diane is for her to just be with him and kind of validate him while he
be an emotional
goes
crutch.
through whatever he's going. Yeah, that's what she's always been to him. She makes him feel better. I think we've all had people like that. It's another kind of relatable.
Being an emotional crutch, but also not really being good for either of, like, you're both kind of, neither of you are particularly good for the other one, but you both end up relying on the other person quite heavily.
You see them come back to each other at all of their rock bottoms, like when Diane comes back from her trip with Sebastian St. Clair and just crashes at Bojack's house and gets drunk and doesn't wash and eats pizza all day and eventually gets kicked out, overstays her welcome. They're always the safe place for each other to go and be their absolute worst. Yeah,
absolutely. So would you want there to be any more episodes or a movie, or?
I'm not sure, honestly. I'm not one of these people that gets annoyed when something I love finishes. I think things need to know when to be done. I don't care about reunion episodes of stuff. Once a story is finished, I'm happy for it to be. I'd rather it was a good story, well told, than that I got to keep hearing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think telling any more of Bojack's story is just going to get repetitive because you've seen all of his history, and you know what's still hanging over him as well is that Penny and her mum have not have still got that story that they didn't go to the press with. The next big thing to happen to Bojack would be that came out, and that's the worst thing that he's done. That would be worse for him than, well, it's probably not worse than what happened with Sarah Lynn, but there's nothing worse than that he's still got hanging over him. So there would be no surprise to that, and it would be a story that we've seen play out in the actual news hundreds of times over the last couple of years. We know how it goes. And I think people would lose a lot of sympathy for Bojack to see that play out. I don't know that it would work as a continuation of the story.
No.
And I feel like all the other characters have had their happy ending. I don't need to know anymore. No, I think I'd be happy to not see any more of it, but I know they have said that they might do more if they come up with anything.
I don't, like you said, I don't really want to see any more from, like, the other people, like the supporting characters. Like, we've had their stories, and like they've all come to their kind of natural conclusion in the series.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, BoJack still has stuff, but it would then mean introducing new characters. And
And I'm not looking for a season 9 of Scrubs situation here.
No, and like I don't really want a new series with new characters.
No.
But I also don't want them dragging old characters or bit characters like can't remember what her name is, the director of the Secretariat film. I can't remember what her name
Kelsey.
is. Kelsey, yeah. Like ultimately she was only a kind of bit character, so there would be no point in dragging her back into to carry on that story. And I think it would be quite short-lived to have a story revolve around just Penny, her mum, whose name escapes me, and Bojack.
Yeah.
So yeah, whilst I would love for there to be more, I just don't think it's required.
Yeah, if they make it, I'll watch it, but I'm not signing any petitions.
No. No, quite. So, on the whole, good, bad, indifferent? What's your...
It's one of my favourite things. I think it's the best thing Netflix has ever made, and possibly ever will. It's such an important show in terms of what it covers and how it does it. And while there were some issues early on with sort of whitewashing casting and stuff, they responded really well to that. I know Raphael Bob Waxberger said, like, yeah, in retrospect, that wasn't great, and I've made a huge effort to get more female and actors of colour in. And they did. So
yeah,
it was important in a lot of ways. And there's just always something for you when you go back to it. There's always something relevant and something that you kind of need to hear, even if you don't want to. Or you can just go back and find the kind of funny episodes. It's always going to be something that I'll go back to and binge over and over again.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, one of my top shows ever. So
yeah,
thumbs up.
I mean, it's not the best animated. It's not the best acted. It's not it's not the best TV show in the world. I mean, it's pretty freaking close, but it's not the best at anything. But it is probably one of the most important TV shows, even just for an animated TV show. That I think there has been, and that there probably will be for a long time. I mean, there are lots of shows out there that are close, but yeah, BoJack Horseman is definitely probably one of the most important ones, just because of kind of all the things that we've mentioned, like the representation, the way that it deals with sensitive subjects. Yes, thank you. And yeah, the way that it deals and handles those. So yeah, not the best at anything, but definitely the most important.
So if anyone hasn't watched it, then they definitely should.
Yes, 2 thumbs up, I guess. I don't know. I don't really like putting those kind of like.
Should we have a little scale?
Yeah, I don't really like putting arbitrary scores on things, but
no.
Yes, it is definitely worth watching. I would probably recommend to watch it over maybe a month or so, to kind of savor it and take it in.
And don't do what I did, and because the finale was released at the same time as the Good Place finale, don't watch the Bojack Horseman finale and the Good Place finale.
Nope.
Right after each other. I cried so much.
Yep.
I was a husk after that. Just no fluid left in my body. Don't do that, dude.
I did the exact same thing.
And I warned you not to.
Yep, even though you told me not to. I did the exact same thing. So
the lesson here is to listen to me.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, go and watch BoJack Horseman. It's excellent. You won't regret it. Well, you might on some episodes.
You will.
You might on some episodes. On other episodes, you might not.
But you'll be a better person for it in the end.
Or you'll just have that you're a terrible person highlighted for you. So, whatever.
Yeah. Can't lose.
Yeah. It will make you a better person, or it will introduce
make you more aware of what a terrible person you are.
Introspective
Which
and
is a good
existential horror. So, win-win.
That's kind of my thing.
Yeah.
That's why I like the show so much.
Cool. Well, I think that's pretty much us. Thank
so.
you to anyone that actually watched. Like, I think at one point we had 3 people watching. I think one of those might have been me.
I wasn't, so one of them wasn't me. So thanks to whoever that was.
But yes, you have been listening to Animated Discussion. I have been Lewis Knight.
And I will continue to be Jenny Allen.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Cool. Right, that worked. That last bit worked well for the actual podcast rather than.
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky trying to balance between podcast and live stream. So
yeah.
Right, if you want to stop your audio.
Mm-hmm.
And then export it as an MP3. I think it's already got that built into it now. I can't remember how you sent it to me last time.
Did I put it in the Dropbox, I think it was Dropbox.
Yeah, there is a Google. There is a Drive.
Exporting as... Oh, it might have been Google then. Yeah, I think it was Google. So it was export as MP3, yeah?
Yes, please.
Okay. Bojack, take 2.
A friend of mine, Claire, messaged... Oh, we're still streaming. Right, let me just cancel that.